not the usual subject discussed during the webinars because it's not so much focused on the language itself as some strategies that might be useful to apply to the knowledge that you already have. And the knowledge that I'm referring to is not just your linguistic knowledge, but your general knowledge as well. So the title of today's webinar is What to Say When You Don't Know What to Say, Short Survey of Social Survival Skills. Now, social occasions can be really awkward sometimes. For example, networking, cocktail parties, you name it. Some people are really afraid of them, some panic, others go to great lengths to avoid these situations altogether. However, once you find yourself in one of such events, there will be one thing that you will not be able to avoid, and that is small talk. I mean, some people really like small talk, some feel very good when they have to talk about very general subjects, others people really hate it. So today we'll take a look at a selection of techniques and a bunch of phrases that might be useful in such a situation. They could be used in order to come up with a nice conversation strategy in order to survive small talk at a party. Now, this webinar will present some potential problems really and ways to think about them, how to approach them painlessly, and as I said, some phrases. So first off, we're going to take a look at the structure of today's presentation. So in part one, we're going to take a look at various types of English, and then we'll move on to social English. We'll try to define what it is, and then we'll move on to the longest part, that is part 3, social survival skills, tips and tricks. This is where you will find out some nice strategies and some phrases which might come in handy. And finally, there's going to be a short quiz summarizing everything that has been presented in today's webinar. So let's move on to part 1, that is various types of English. As all of you know, there are lots of different language courses available. Some of them are general English courses, some of them are business English courses, medical English, legal English, you name it, lots of different types. So it would be quite interesting to come up with the factors which define different types of English. What is the difference between general English and business English? How does business English differ from medical or legal English? Maybe these categories overlap. So let's take a look at what it is. There is this idea of linguistic frames. Now, these are elements which are peculiar to a special type of language and make this type of language different from other types of language. It could be the subject, it could be the situation, the place, vocabulary, and structures used for that particular type of context. So this context, in other words, is called a frame, a linguistic frame. A very typical example is business English, and this is what we will take a look at first. So frames of business English. As you see, when it comes to the subject, it's usually business related in any way. When it comes to the situation, it's usually work, because this is where you need business English. Place, it could be an office, for example. However, some other spaces are also possible. When it comes to vocabulary, well, it's business related, so you have a selection of phrases which will appear in business English books, but will not appear in other types of books. When it comes to structures, these are, for example, conditionals, very useful while negotiating, for example. If you do this, we will do that. If you did that, we would do that. If you had done that, we would have done something else. So basically, as you see, there are some structures which will be more useful in business context and structures which are not as useful in business English, for example. So the first question to you is to come up with the frames of social English. Let's try to come up with some ideas. What kind of subjects, what kind of situations, where exactly could we use that type of language? What vocabulary structures do you think? And right now, I do encourage you to use the chat box to type your answers. You can choose any area here. If you have an idea about subject, just type the subject. If you have an idea about the place, for example, just type the place. Let's take a look at the suggestions. All right, political situation. I see some of you or suggesting finance. All right, party. Subject, everything. That's a very insightful comment, I must say. Meeting with friends. Subject, children. Absolutely. So as you can see, there are lots and lots of ideas. Come on, I'm waiting for some more because I do believe that you do have lots of other ideas. Place, I see restaurant, club, sport. So subject area, that would be sport, meetings in pub, absolutely. Weather, subject, that's right. Weather is actually one of the most commonly spoken about things when it comes to social English. Travel, hobbies, absolutely. Okay, in fact, I prepared some subjects here. So in the next slide, you're going to take a look at my suggestions. Some of them are exactly the same as the suggestions that you have just typed in the chat box. Let's take a look at that. So subject, weather, place, anything. Situation, party, meeting, lunch, anything. Place, room, restaurant, office, any place really. Vocabulary, anything you can think of. And structures, anything you can think of. All right, so as you see, it's not that easy to define. So the question is, what the blaze is social English? If the definition is so broad, how to come up with a meaningful description of that type of language? Well, so the first thing that I suggest here is don't ask what it is, because it would be exceedingly difficult to define. Ask how you can use what you already know in social situations. So basically, when it comes to defining social English, it's not so much what it is, but how you can use it. So it's about strategies rather than words. That's why it's extremely difficult to find a course in social English, because it would be very, very broad. So the closest thing to social English is actually general English, I would say. So that's what social English is, and that's why in today's presentation we will focus on those three areas that you see right now. How to start or join a conversation, that's one thing. How to keep it going, and how to answer questions, because that's the usual thing happening in social situations. You have to start a conversation or join a group of people talking about something. You have to make sure that the conversation is going, it doesn't die naturally in the middle of a sentence, and you have to know follow that you're able to give interesting answers. And is going to be a tip and some useful language which might be useful in a given situation. Let's start with tip 1. Never start a conversation. And again, before I reveal what you should not start a conversation with, a question to you. How would you not start a conversation? Or if you want to approach it from a different perspective, how you would start a conversation. And again, I do encourage you to use the chat box to type your suggestions. Let's see what you think might be a bad start for a discussion and what could be a good beginning of a discussion. You look like my future wife. That's nice. Talking about problems. All right, that's definitely not a way of beginning a conversation. Interrupting somebody else's discussion. Politics. Are you sick? That's right. I mean, possibly if somebody approached me and said something like, are you sick? The conversation would not even start, really. You look so bad. Absolutely. That's also not a good way of beginning a conversation. Are you pregnant? I see, guys, you've got lots of ideas how not to start a conversation. Absolutely. Now, I will reveal what I prepared beforehand, so take a look at that. Never start a conversation with, do you remember me? Now, why is it a bad thing to start a conversation with? Well, the chances are that the person you are directing this question at will not remember you, actually. So the answer might be, well, no, I don't remember you. I have no idea who you are, basically. And that causes a very problematic situation where you have to actually explain where you know the person from, and still this will not guarantee that the person will recognize you. It might take some time, so it's a really awkward situation. You approach somebody and fire away a question like that. No. So basically, something might be a little bit more useful comes right here. Something like, oh, hi, my name is something, we met in some place, but it was years ago. Oh, hello, and then you introduce yourself. Nice to meet you again. We used to be in the same sports club, for example. So as you see, instead of asking the person whether or not the person remembers us, it's just good to say where we know the person from, and then the conversation might naturally continue. All right, so that was tip 1. Now we're moving on to tip 2. Now, tip 2 is about matching the interlocutor's mood. So it might sometimes happen that the person you want to start a conversation with is not feeling especially good. So you would not actually, it's not advisable to improve a person's mood in any way. Or basically, when you see that a person is feeling bad, you should not act too enthusiastically. If the person is very enthusiastic, you should not act like a downer, really, in order to create a situation which does not match the person's mood. And some useful phrases, again, which might come in handy to match the interlocutor's mood, come right here. That was a rather monotonous day. That's until now, obviously. Or that was rather a lively day. That's until now, obviously. And again, those phrases could be adapted for different purposes. They show a certain approach to the entire situation rather than the phrases you have to stick to in a situation like that. It just shows that, when the reaction of the person to your words about the day being monotonous is that the person is rather lively, then you change what you are saying in order to match the mood. And the opposite is true here as well. So if you say that the day was lively, but the person doesn't seem to be sharing that feeling about that particular day, you should also smoothly change the mood in order to match it. Okay, so these were the first 2 tips. Now, another thing that's really important to mention here is that complaining actually is always bad. So even if you feel bad, even if the day was monotonous, you should not complain, because if you start a conversation with complaining, people will rather avoid you than treat you as a fantastic conversationalist. Okay, and now for something completely different, to how to match a person's mood in an unusual way. Mary Poppins comes here with a helping hand. Take a look at this word. It's a very long word. I made it colorful so that you can see each part distinctly. And the word sounds something like supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. It actually comes from a song by Mary Poppins. Now, there's a short explanation here. According to Mary Poppins, supercalifragilisticexpialidocious is something to say when you have nothing to say. So if you say it in the right manner, it can be used to match any mood. Now, I do encourage you to say this word aloud. You can follow me. I will start saying it slowly. Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. Now, if you say something like that, do expect people to look at you in a funny way. But basically then, it can be a nice springboard for conversation. My person's mood. The chances are that the person's mood, after hearing that word, is going to improve. So let's move on to tip 3. Refer to the visuals around you. And again, a question to you guys. So what do you think you can refer to? Imagine you can look actually at the room where you are right now and think of the things which you could refer to in order to start an interesting conversation. I would like to see some suggestions in the chat box, really. What thing draws your attention and you think you could start talking about that in order to start a conversation, small talk conversation? Color of walls, furniture. It's a nice place, absolutely. Very general, but you don't have to be specific as well. Music, Oh, that's right. So background music, bright, pictures. Absolutely. If you see some pictures, you might definitely refer to the pictures. Plants in the room. Computer screen. That's right. Like, oh my God, your computer screen is so fantastic. View from the window at the 25th floor. Absolutely. Weather. First aid kit. Absolutely. It's kind of like when you pass out, I will know how to make sure that you regain your consciousness. Got the first aid kit. Photos at the desk. Absolutely. So all the photographs are quite interesting. As you see, there are lots of things around you which might serve as a good starting point of a conversation. Or a mug, for example, from a company, and say, oh, you've got a mug from that company, or a ball pen from a company. How much time is left till 5 p.m.? Absolutely. And then you can have a conversation about how time flew when you're having fun. 3, continued, even where there's nothing around you. Now, this is tricky, because really, I mean, nothingness can also be inspirational, and I'm going to show you this in a second. We're going to take a look at some phrases first. What will follow will be some conversations based on the subject of nothingness or nothing around you. So, some useful language. These are lovely hors d'oeuvres. So here we've got a situation with a cocktail party where you refer to the food itself. Oh, that cold cuts platter reminds me of my childhood. Now, well, I don't know exactly how you can apply this sentence, how you can use it in a conversation in a meaningful way, but this does sound interesting. Or what a wonderful wallpaper. And actually, this last sentence could be used to refer to a wallpaper on a wall in a room, or a wallpaper on your computer screen. All right, now the subject of nothingness. Take a look at that. Sample conversation 1. It goes something like, these bare concrete walls are both terrifyingly cold and surprisingly familiar. And then the reaction, say what? Well, minimalism. It's omnipresent these days, industrial design, music, etc. So as you see, bare concrete walls, walls with nothing. You can imagine a room with concrete walls, nothing on them, can also inspire a conversation about industrial design, music, etc. Sample conversation 2. There is nothing here. Well, nothingness can be inspirational. What do you mean? Silence is a form of nothingness. The pianist John Cage was inspired by silence and commercialized it. How? You can buy 4 minutes, 33 seconds of silence by John Cage on iTunes for 99 cents. And this is true, actually, guys. If you want to buy a song which lasts 4 minutes, 33 seconds, and you listen to silence, just go to iTunes and look for John Cage's track, 4 minutes, 33 seconds. That's the actual title of that. So as you see, nothingness can also be inspirational. Those phrases in orange, actually, are highlighted in order to draw your attention to them. So something is inspirational, or you can be inspired by something. Okay, so these were the 3 tips. Now we'll take a look at tip 4. Digressions are the what? Okay, so the question is to you, what do you think digressions are? Are they something good or something bad when it comes to small talk? And again, I do encourage you to use the chat box to type your suggestions. And possibly you might come up with a metaphor here, what those digressions really are. Something good, something bad. Rather useful. Digressions are absolutely rather useful. Are good to make conversations more dynamic. That's a very interesting answer. Absolutely. So I see that the vast majority of you believes that digressions are something good, but important not to lose main topic. All right. Digression is a way to change the subject. Okay, now let's take a look at this quotation, because actually tip 3 is a quote by a fictional character, Tristram Shandy, from a book by Lawrence Stern. Let's take a look what he had to say about digressions. Digressions are the sunshine. Really, in a conversation, for the conversation's sake, digressions are truly the sunshine, because your ability to associate things which are seemingly disconnected is a very useful ability, which is especially handy when it comes to social situations, when you're able to see some similarities and then jump from one subject to another, etc., and then come back to the original subject. Let's take a look at some useful language which you can use in order to introduce a digression. So you've got some phrases here, that matter of me, and then you say what something reminds you of. Speaking of which, and then you suddenly realize that there is some associated thing with the subject of your current discussion. And then I've just realized that, and then you say what you have just realized. And the last one, let me go off on a tangent here. Go off on a tangent is a very nice phrase. It means to digress, to start a digression. So go off on a tangent. Okay. So we've looked at that. Now let's move on. Tip 5. Were or spot something eye-catching. Now the question is again to you. As you see, there is this frame from the movie Matrix, the woman in the red dress who drew Neo's attention while he was practicing all the good stuff in the Matrix. The question is, why do you think this might be useful? Why do you were or spot somebody wearing something eye-catching? In what way could it facilitate small talk? And again, I do encourage you to type your answers in the chat box. All right. I see some of you are typing something. All right. It might be an interesting subject. Okay. The subject can be observed at the moment. I see. You're suggesting that it's a good way of actually starting a conversation with somebody. And this is exactly what I wanted to say, really. If you want to approach somebody and comment or just start a conversation, it's possibly a good beginning to comment on something that's very eye-catching. It could be, for example, a tie which is unusual, interesting glass frames, or interesting glasses frames, interesting whatever. In fact, shoes, trousers, whatever. So let's just take a look at some phrases. A ring, for example. Let's take a look at some phrases which might be useful in such a situation. Like, I couldn't help but notice that, and then you say what you noticed. That's a very original something. Please excuse my being forward, but I noticed that, and you say what you noticed. These are really lovely, well, sandals, for example. I've always wanted to have something like that. It's absolutely fantastic. How did you come about this? And this is a nice beginning of a conversation. Now, let's move on. Tip 6. Now, if you don't feel courageous enough to approach somebody just like that and comment on a piece of garment or some decorative element that the person is wearing, you might always ask someone to make introductions. You might ask a person whom you know, the host of a party or a mutual friend, to introduce you to the person that you're interested in. So some phrases, that's a phrase which might be useful in this particular context is something like, I noticed this man, woman, wearing high heels or wearing black dress, whatever, over there. Could you possibly introduce me to him, her? Now, this should do the trick. However, in tip 7, when introduction is impossible because the host is busy, because your mutual friend is busy as well, well, maybe he is choking on a fish bone right now and he cannot really talk. It's really good to learn some quick and dirty facts about the people you're interested in order to have something to start a conversation with. So if you cannot ask the host, if you cannot ask your mutual friend to physically approach the person you're interested in, just learn some basic facts, such as these ones, for example. Oh, hi, you must be John Doe. Jack told me how you met in, and then you just mentioned the place you know that those two people met. Or you might go for something like, you're John Doe, aren't you? Jack mentioned to me that your spaghetti is heavenly. So it can be anything, a quick and dirty fact about the person, and there you go. You can start a conversation by referring to something that you already know about the person. Now, the next tip is actually about answering questions in an intriguing manner. Now, intriguing manner and with a pinch of salt. And the question here is to you, what does it mean with a pinch of salt? Do you know that expression? With a pinch of salt. And again, I'm looking at the chat box to see what you're typing. See, some of you are saying, no, that's a new expression. In a moment, I see the Polish translation of that. It's a very good translation, but I would try to avoid using Polish. So, right, is he sarcastic in a funny way? Okay, so I will not keep you much longer like that. So with a pinch of salt basically means with a distance towards yourself. So you are not entirely serious about your answer, about what's being said. You are looking at it from a perspective, you are not taking everything too seriously, with a pinch of salt. And let's take a look at this, a common question. Now, what kind of question do you think is a common one that could be asked at any social occasion? Can you think of any questions that are very likely to crop up? Hi, how are you? How are you? All right. What do you think about the party? That's an interesting one. How about this? I see lots of suggestions, and these are very interesting suggestions, I must say, about time. Okay. Well, the question, do you like this lobster? Absolutely. That's a very nice question. Or how do you eat that lobster? Should you rip the head off? Where do you come from? Actually, that's a very good question, because the question that I came up with is, where are you from? So where do you come from, where are you from is one of those questions which sooner or later is going to crop up. Now, so the suggestion here is, that the answer is like, a common answer is Pinkerton. Well, now, the thing is that when you hear something like that, it's a head scratcher, and the chances are that you don't know that place, and then you don't know what to ask about that place. So in order to avoid giving a very obvious answer, just the name of the place, go for something like that. Learn one or two cool facts about your hometown, about the place where you come from, and then talk about it in an interesting way. So don't just give the name of the place, but follow it up with something interesting. Let's take a look at some examples. A better answer, number one. Oh, it's where they make the best cheese in the country. Have you tried it? It's been recognized worldwide and awarded at numerous cheese festivals. So as you see, you just have to do a little bit of homework to find out something interesting about the place where you're from, and when you follow the name of that place with that bit of information, it's going to be a much more interesting answer than just name. A better answer, number two. It's famous for being home to one of the largest statues of Jesus, but there's no Copacabana there, unfortunately. Now the question is to you. It's actually a place in Poland. Do you know what place this is? I encourage you to type your answer in the chat box. is home to one of the largest statues of Jesus, but there's no Copacabana there. All right, I see some of you are already typing the right answer. I'm just waiting for some other. That's right. Another good answer. Absolutely, I see. All right, so it's famous for the hospitality as well. All right, absolutely. So as you see, instead of just giving the name, which most of you guessed correctly, it's Shwipo, give what it is famous for, etc. It's a much more interesting answer because then you can make references to other things about the city. You can start a subject about something completely different. If you mention Copacabana, for example, you can start the subject of holidays. So that's why digressions and associations are so important when it comes to small talk. Now, another common question is, what do you do? So again, a very common answer is just giving that you're performing. Like, I'm a lawyer, I'm a vet. Well, okay, sometimes some people might be interested in asking you about the technical details about your job, etc., but it's highly unlikely. So in order to make people more interested in what you do, think how to describe your job in a cool way. And again, we're going to take a look at some answers which might be better. I switch off and on people's consciousness while they're being operated on by administering proper kinds and doses of anesthetics. Now, the question is again to you, do you know what job this is? I switch off and on people's consciousness while they're being operated on by administering proper kinds and doses of anesthetics. I see. Fantastic. I see some answers, and not a very generic answer, a doctor, but you have already identified the speciality of that doctor. It's an anesthesiologist. Absolutely. Absolutely. Fantastic. So another answer, a better answer, let's take a look at that. A better answer number 2. I facilitate the emergence of new neural connections in human brains by familiarizing people with the seemingly impenetrable body of linguistic knowledge. All right, and again, the question is to you. Who could describe his or her job like that? Yeah, I see some answers on the way. Very good answers. That's right. Magician. That's a very interesting answer. Okay, some of you say teacher, some of you say English teacher, some of you say linguist, psychologist. Actually, what I had in mind when coming up with this definition is actually how I could describe what I do in a non-obvious way, I would say. So new neural connections in the brain are definitely something that happens along the way when you learn new words, and then you get familiar with something which at first glance seems to be really impenetrable, like the body of linguistic knowledge, lots of words, lots of structures, etc. This is something I would say actually to make people interested in what I do. Okay, so now guys, let's move on. And the next part of those tips is going to be focused on how to keep the conversation going. So do you know some tricks how to keep the conversation going? How would you make sure that people, once they start talking to you, they will be talking more? But are you bored? Ask questions. Very good. Ask open questions. What do you think about? Or change the subject. I see lots of suggestions on the way. Let's take a look at what I've prepared for you. It's let them shine. Now, the thing is that when you want people to talk to you, make them feel like they are stars, really. Let them shine. Now, how to do that? Well, we're going to take a look at some useful language, and I see some of you suggesting smiling. Absolutely, smiling is a very useful strategy. Let's take a look at useful language, how to let people shine. Wow, sounds like fun. Can you tell me a bit more? Really? How come? And then, you must be joking. All right, so as you see, you have to react to what people are saying. In the culture in general, you acknowledge that you're listening to what the person is saying. You usually nod your head or make sounds which sound something like right. Now, in the English language, it's much more natural to react in a lively way by saying something, asking people additional questions, using those expressions because they show your genuine interest in what people have to say. Now, tip 10, be the parrot. So that's another strategy of making people tell you more. What does it mean to be the parrot? Well, let's take a look at some useful language and you will know it instantly. Sample conversation. There is nothing here. Nothing here. I like pickled gherkins. You like pickled gherkins. Absolutely. I see some of you are using chat box to saying that being the parrot means to repeat, and this is exactly what it is about. Just repeat the last thing said by your interlocutor with a rising intonation so that it sounds like a question, and this is the way of encouraging a person to say more, because this just shows your interest in what has just been spoken. So by repeating the last thing, you do encourage people to tell you more. And final tip, that's going to be the last tip, is read the headlines. This tip is actually about having a universal subject to talk about. So it's good to take a look at the news headlines because usually people read the news, read the internet, newspapers, etc., and they will have at least some knowledge about what you are going to mention. So how to say that you read something in the news and you want to share that piece of information with other people? Well, let's take a look at useful language here. Oh, by the way, did you know that I just happened to read about, on leaving home I read that, do you happen to know that? Or you can say, guess what? And then you share the news, you break the news. So that was the last tip. We're going to have something completely different, and this is going to be a short survey. Which tip out of the 11 tips presented in today's webinar do you find most useful? Just type the number and this is going to be perfectly okay. Let's just see, which tip do you think is the one for you? Number 1. I see number 1 and 10. 3. Okay. Lots of 10s I see, and 1s. So a quick glance tells me that tip 1, tip 10, and I see that some of you are also interested in tip 9 as well, and 7. Learn some quick and dirty facts about the people you're interested in. Okay, so now guys, as I said, this is going to be a short survey, and this survey is going to be followed by a short quiz. Questions are going to be rather easy, so I just hope that you're going to enjoy that rather than be stressed by it. So let's take a look at the first question. Which statement has more truth in it? A. Social English can be clearly defined. B. Social English is about activating your linguistic and general knowledge. That's easy peasy. B, definitely. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's very difficult, in fact, to clearly define social English. Some frames can be more or less outlined, but it's difficult, so it's about activating your general knowledge, your linguistic knowledge, and using appropriate strategies. Another question, which is a better way of starting a conversation? A, hi, do you remember me? B, hi, we met in. Oh, definitely B. I see lots of you just pressing the B button, absolutely. Okay, another question. Small talk. In small talk, the simpler the answer, the better. And statement A, yep, being to the point is always great. Or B, if you do it, you can come across as a bore. All right. All right, I see. I mean, here, as I said, it's quite, when you give the answer, which is very short, very to the point, it's not very good when it comes to social occasions. You have to be intriguing. So if you do it, you can come across as a bore and people might not be willing to continue the conversation with you. That's why it's really cool to think of how you can describe your job in an interesting way, how you can describe the place where you're from by adding some extra bits of information to make people interested in what you have to say, to make them interested in your answers. Being to the point is always great at business meetings, that's for sure. However, when it comes to small talk, and this is very often just conversation for the conversation's sake, B sounds, or B is a better choice. Okay, now another task, a little bit different from the previous tasks. Here you've got a selection. Of 5 sentences, and as you see, there are blank spaces. The task is pretty obvious. You just have to put those things which have been removed, of those phrases which have been removed from the words, from the sentences, back where they belong. Okay, I see again, lots of answers on the way. Fantastic. I see that you are very attentive throughout the entire webinar. Great. In a moment, I'm going to show you the answers. Okay, let's take a look at the answers, and there's going to be a question as well. So as you see, those sentences are right here with all the words back in place. Now the question is, which statement below would you use to digress? So in other words, to start a digression. Which ones seem to be okay for that purpose? Okay. Absolutely. I mean, the thing is that a person who can easily associate different concepts could in fact use any of these in order to introduce a digression. However, the ones which seem to be the best for that particular purpose are, number one, which obviously would start the digression about somebody's childhood. You could use number 3 as well, speaking of which, I know a place where number 4 as well, number 5 as well, but in fact, number 2, what a wonderful wallpaper, could start a digression about some patterns, about interior decoration, about a whole range of different subjects. Okay, another question is like that. Again, you've got 5 sentences, some phrases removed from those sentences, and again, the task is just to put them back where they should be. Okay, I see some answers on the way. Fantastic. Again, I see that some of you are not just typing one answer, but all the answers. So it's a little bit more time consuming, but you have from 1, I mean, give answers from 1 to 5. Okay, great. Let's take a look at the answers. Okay, so as you see, most of you were right about these sentences. Here you see those phrases back in the sentences to which they belong. And the question is, which phrases would encourage people to talk more? Which phrases could you use for that particular purpose? To let your interlocutor shine, to let them feel like a star. All right. In fact, again, as I said, since social English is very difficult to define, to come up with very clear-cut boundaries for what is social English, what is not, the same applies to those questions, really, because lots of them could be used for that purpose. However, this "how come," can you tell me more about it? Sounds like a good way of encouraging people to elaborate more on the subject. And then something like, "Excuse my being forward, but I noticed your unusual cufflinks," for example, could also encourage people to talk more. Okay, so this is it. Thank you so much for your attention today. Hopefully that webinar was revealing to you that you found out some new communication strategies which you will use from time to time. And hopefully small talk will not be as scary as it sometimes is, because now you will know exactly what to say when you don't know what to say. So on a one final thing I want to say is that the meeting today was supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, and now you know what it means. Thank you very much, guys, and now over to Anya.